as they wait a little. How are you, Rashid?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, getting the children out of the house today. I mean, of course, of all days, it was they both were dragging their feet, but we got
Yeah.
there.
We have one person, Donna. Hi, Donna. We'll just wait a few more seconds for people to come in. Still need um, Marge. Hi, Marge.
And Omar, you post this later, right?
Yes, yes. So I'll post it probably tomorrow. I can usually do it on the same day, but again, things been a little
I learned. I
busy.
mean, like my tour, I learned like no matter how many people show up, if you have that video, hundreds, if not thousands, of more people watch that than
Oh
could ever
yeah,
make it to the event. And so I'm always just like,
absolutely. That's absolutely what happens. We'll have at least 100 views on our videos. And then if, some article hits and people start looking for things, then we'll get more hits. Maria. Okay, so you know what? I'll just go ahead and get started and people will come in. Hi everyone, I'm Omar Acevedo and I'm the Literary Program Coordinator here at the Mark Twain House and Museum. Thank you for joining us for this virtual program for Diva. Virtual programs like this are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are grateful to honor his memory with these programs. And also a big thank you to our members. I'm sure we have some in the virtual audience. But if you're not a member, please consider supporting our museum by becoming a member. There are so many benefits to becoming a member. You'll receive free or discounted admission to our author programs, um, free admission to the house and museum, additional discounts in the store and cafe, and much more. You can reach out to me or you can visit our website for more information. There are several tiers of membership, so you might want to look at that before you reach out to us. Now on to our guests. Our author, Daisy Goodwin, is the author of the best-selling novels The American Heiress and The Fortune Hunter. She attended Columbia University's film school as a Harkness scholar after earning a degree in history at Cambridge University and was chair of the judging panel of the 2010 Orange Prize for Fiction. She is the screenwriter and executive producer of the PBS masterpiece drama Victoria. Our moderator, Rashid Musin, is the author of My Government Means to Kill Me. He is a graduate of Georgetown University. His writing career began when he partnered up with T.J. Brady, and together they were hired as staff writers on the Fox drama Lie to Me. As a writing team, Rashid and TJ have worked on Bel Air, The Chi, and Narcos, among other drama series. Rashid and TJ are currently executive producers of Bel Air. During this event, we encourage you to have a conversation with each other in the chat. If you have a specific question, though, please post that directly into the Q&A section that's on the bottom left of the screen. So that's it from me. I will turn this over to Daisy and Rashid. Please sit back and enjoy.
thank you, Omar. Good morning, Daisy, or good afternoon, Daisy, depending on where you are.
Hi,
I
Rashid.
Hi. I'm going to gush a little bit here. I love this novel. This, for me, is what historical fiction is supposed to be and do. It's not just that you're hitting people with a ton of research. It's that the research and everything is woven beautifully into the tapestry. And I read this book, I feel like I'm in the room with Maria Callas. When she's on stage, I feel like my heart is beating along with hers. And it was a total win for me. So congratulations on this novel. I think it's magnificent.
Thank you so much. That is such music to my ears, as you might say, as Maria might say. No, yeah. I mean, the way I approach it is when I'm writing historical fiction is to read everything I can lay my hands on, watch stuff, everything, and then when I start to write, I just leave it all behind, and then it's what floats to the surface that makes the cut, if you know what I mean. So
Oh
that
yeah, you had
I'm
me from the
in
start.
there.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of Maria Callas. I saw her. I saw well, not to see her. I saw Masterclass, which is about her 30
Yeah.
years ago on Broadway, and I loved it. When did Maria Callas come into your life as a music lover?
Oh God, I was 8 years old, and my mother brought back this record, you know, an LP, and put it on the record player. That's how long ago it was. And I just heard this voice, and it spoke to me. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I knew that this woman was for me. This voice was for me. I saw her face on the cover of the LP, and I was kind of transfixed. And I don't know, she just became the soundtrack of my life. And, you know, she's been with me for everything. You know, whenever I need a kind of tonic or an oral boost or anything, I listen to Callas, and she understands.
And when did you decide you were going to write a novel about her? And how did, I mean, it feels like one of those ideas that you have and you go, oh, I could, I'd love it, but I couldn't. Oh, I can't touch that, but can I?
Well, you know what it was? I realized her centenary was coming up, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, that's the time to do it, because this year is her centenary year. And then I had this just feeling that, you know, I'd read everything, I'd read all the biographies over the years, and I felt none of them really did her justice. And when I was working on Victoria, the PBS show, I sort of had this notion, because Victoria got her idea of how to be a queen from watching, you know, opera singers perform, because she very rarely went out when she was a very young girl, but then she'd see these divas perform on stage, and I sort of thought, that's how she learnt to be a queen. And then I thought of Maria Callas, and I realized I wanted to write a book about, as it were, a secular queen, a musical queen, a goddess, actually, a diva. And I wanted to get away from the idea that Maria is this tragic figure, because for me, there is nothing tragic about being the most successful opera singer of all time, you know. And that's what I love about her, that yes, there is some stuff in her life, but actually she achieved so much, and she did it with such style and grace and elegance. And I wanted to kind of rescue the word diva from the idea that it's a sort of capricious woman who wants 6 types of mineral water in her dressing room, and make her into
that I don't think
a goddess.
Oh, yes. And I think one of the things you kind of illustrate that we don't take care of is a lot of what she's doing is defensive. There are a lot of people in the opera world who are trying to take advantage of her and trying to back her into more performances or get more out of her than she agreed to. And so we'd only hear in the news, oh, she canceled a show. And you go, well, she never agreed to that show.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. She was, I think she was the victim of the kind of press that women get, you know. They're told that they're difficult. Whereas if it had been a man, you know, there would be no question, I'm not doing that show. I didn't agree to it, you know. But because she's a woman, she's branded difficult, capricious, diva-esque.
What was it like to sort of get into her skin as a writer? I mean, is she fun to write for? Is it draining? What are those days like where you're going, you sit down, you're going, I need to channel the voice of Maria Callas?
I think it was quite hard on my family. But yeah.
Are you a method writer?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah. I learned to sing. That was my secret weapon for this book. I took opera singing lessons, and that made all the difference, because
tell me about how many hours a week, how long, what is that?
Oh, I did 2 hours a week for about 6 months, and I can't say that, you know, I'm ever going to pursue a second career as a singer, but it really helped me. It helped me in lots of ways. I understood the importance of a voice and having what that means, and also the power of being able to sing really, really loudly like that. I mean, to be able to actually project so that you can hit the other end of an opera house is astonishing, you know, because now we're so used to people being mic'd, but opera singers are the real deal. You know, they are like marathon runners. They are athletes as well as actors. And that's what's so extraordinary. They have to do it all. They have to, you know, sing at that pitch, which is very exhausting. They have to be perfectly musical, and they have to act in costumes. I mean, it's a very, very difficult job.
One of the things I got a deeper appreciation for was not only the pressure of being on stage and having to carry this whole performance in front of all these dignitaries, but it's a different kind of singing, in the sense that when you start an aria, when you start a phrase, if you get up on the wrong foot, if your breath isn't in the right place, if your voice is tight, you know that a minute and a half from here is going to be disaster.
Exactly.
And there's almost nothing you can do to avoid it.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
Do you think, and I was wondering about this, I mean, because there's a great, and I don't want to give too much away, there's a great thought of what does singing the way she sang do to a voice and longevity. Do you think it was more frightening to be Maria Callas at the end of her career than at the beginning? Like somehow the pressure of it seems, it seems almost more taxing.
I think it was much harder at the end of her career because she had sung so much. And I mean, her real tragedy, I think, was that she'd oversung when she was in her 20s. Now, if you're an opera singer, people are very careful to kind of graduate your career. So you would never sing, La Traviata before you were 30, sort of thing. But I mean, Maria was doing it all in her early, in her mid-20s. And so I think she just performed so much that when it got to the end of her, when she was in her mid-30s, which is very young, really, she knew that her voice she couldn't rely on it totally. So, she would start singing Casta Diva and then, she'd get to that high E and it wouldn't be there. It would crack. And, even most of the audience probably wouldn't even notice, but for her, it wasn't the same. And she was such a perfectionist that made her singing very difficult because she could have gone on, I mean, there are lots of roles she could have sung, but, she wanted to sing those bel canto parts that are
very difficult repertoire.
Oh my God. Yeah, seriously.
I was also wondering, one of the things I enjoyed about the book is there are real moments where you're showing us a very vulnerable side of Maria Callas, which sort of goes against her persona as someone who's formidable and doesn't suffer fools. Along with vulnerability, what are some of the things you think people get wrong about Maria Callas in particular and great artists of her caliber in general?
Okay, well, that is a very good question, Rashid. I think that one of the things is that she's perceived as a woman first rather than as a genius first. And I think that, when people talk about, well, her voice would have lasted much longer if she hadn't lost all the weight. And, they sort of assume she had an eating disorder. What they don't realize is that Maria Callas, for her voice always, always came first. And the reason she lost the weight was so she could be the best artist she could possibly be. She wanted to be the full package. She wanted to look the part as well as sound the part. So I don't think her losing weight was because, it wasn't an eating disorder. It was simply a conscious effort of will because she wanted to have everything under her control. She wanted to look perfect for her roles. If she was going to play La Traviata, a consumptive woman who's sort of dying slowly, and is almost emaciated by the end, she wanted to look like that person. And, before that, opera singers had been, what's the word? They would park and bark. They had magnificent voices. They would stop, they would sing, they would go to the next bit. They did exactly the same performance in every single production all around the world. And that's what you got from opera. But when Maria came on the scene, she was acting, and she was acting the music, she was acting with her body, and it's a completely different thing. And when you see her, there isn't enough footage of her, but when you see her on stage, you realize what a difference it must have made.
Well, and she opened that door for everybody who followed. Like you almost have to go back and watch opera before her, and you'll see people singing very pretty, women smiling as they sing about committing suicide. And you're like, well, maybe we should be upset. Maybe we should play this for real. And it's really, she's phenomenal in that way.
Oh, she's extraordinary.
I think something else you sort of bring to bear on this is, I think people think that performers sort of live their lives like the rest of us and then go to the theater and suddenly become something else. They don't understand the toll that what she's eating for breakfast, what she's drinking when she goes to bed, that something like going to a party can have a disastrous effect on a performance the next evening. Can you speak about the toll at which it cost? I mean, being Maria Callas, took a great deal of effort.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you literally have to, I mean, she was living like a nun in many ways. In, you know, at the height of her career, she couldn't go out, she couldn't smoke, she didn't drink, she watched her food very carefully. You know, she hated air conditioning. Yeah, there's a famous Maria quote about, you know, the only thing that sopranos hate more than other sopranos is air conditioning, which I think is a great quote. And you know, she had to guard her voice like a very small baby. Basically, it's like carrying an infant around all the time, and it's a full-time job. And you know, there's no question that she could have had a child or anything like that, because her voice was everything to her. And you know, her life was completely organized around her performance schedule and sort of her bodily needs. You know, for example, she wouldn't sing on the first day of her period, and that was sort of built into her contract. So that I mean, it's such a physical thing, and it's not, I mean, acting, yes, is a physical thing too, but singing, it involves you to be at peak performance. You can't, adrenaline is not enough for singing. You've got to have,
you're not going to go out there and wing it.
No. And also you've got to be in great shape too, because you know, you need stomach muscles like iron to sing. And you know, Maria was always saying, you know, she could say, you can punch me and I won't feel anything. And I'm sure that's true. She had these incredibly strong core. So
you also, in this portrait of her, don't shy away from, I'll call some of her harsher sides. She had a sort of deep resentment and not much sympathy for her mother and her sister. Why was that important for you to include in this sort of portrait of Maria?
I don't know. I find myself quite often writing about difficult mothers, and I wouldn't know why that is. But I suppose, I think for me, it explains Maria's incredible sort of drive, because if you're not unconditionally loved when you're a small child by your mother or your father, whatever, but if you don't have that sort of that unquestioning affection, which she certainly didn't. I don't think Maria was loved by her mother until her mother realized that Maria could sing. And even then, I think Maria knew very well that it was the voice that her mother loved. And I think that gave her this sort of determination to matter and to find that love wherever she could. She felt cheated of it. And so I think, you know, when she starts to sing to audiences and she's getting this incredible wave of affection and so forth, I think that is, you know, that fills the missing piece in her heart. And I think that is, and I think she deeply resents her mother for not making her feel whole in herself. And it's really interesting because I think that Maria was fantastically confident about her singing and about her musical ability. I mean, she had no question. She knew how good she was, which is very interesting in a woman. But I think she didn't have that sense of self that you get from having a really good mother, to you know, that would get her through the other things. So she was constantly looking for that affection elsewhere, and I think that's terribly hard. And I think that's why she was vulnerable to Onassis.
Well, one of the things that you said about her mother, I wondered if you felt like, did she have this throughout her life, which is, do people love me the person or they love me the voice? Do you love me off stage or you just love me on stage?
I think that's true. I mean, it was something I explored a bit too in my first book, American Heiress, because, you know, she's a very, very rich woman. And again, for her, it's like, do you love me or do you love the money? And I think it's the same for Maria. And with Onassis, of course, the sort of irony was that he wasn't interested in music at all. He, you know, opera was not his thing one bit. And so, you know, he was interested in Maria the woman, but I think he was interested in Maria the celebrity too. And I think it took her a long time to see that, sadly.
Let's talk a little bit about, you know, Aristotle Onassis. it's I like this. It's a unconventional love story, I feel, in your book, in the sense that generally in a novel, you're rooting for the two lovers to get together, even if they don't like each other in the beginning. And there are times where I understand why she is driven towards him or compelled to love him. And there are other times I'm saying, Maria, run away.
Mm.
What was it? What was it like to sort of walk through this love story?
Oh.
Were you, were you rooting for them, or how were you approaching this?
Oh God, I so wanted it to work for them, even though I deliberately started it with Onassis marrying Jackie Kennedy, because I knew otherwise I'd want them to end up together. Because of course you want them to be
Yeah.
happy, you want Maria to be happy, but I'm writing, a true life story, so that wasn't going to happen. I knew, but I felt it was important that you felt the passion between them, because if you don't feel that, then none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I suppose what I really felt, I wanted Onassis to be, I mean, obviously he was a monster in many ways, but he was also obviously very attractive, magnetic, charismatic. He was like Maria, he was Greek, he was from, self-made. He wasn't a kind of aristocratic playboy like everybody else,
Mhm.
that surrounded them. He was the real deal. And I think that was a very interesting thing that sort of kept them together, that they both had an appreciation of what it was like to have nothing. Um, and I needed him to be sexy, and I had to feel attracted to him a bit. And it wasn't about the money either. I wanted to make it clear that for Maria, it really wasn't about the money. I mean, yes, the money helped, but that wasn't her issue. What she liked was the fact that he found her overwhelmingly physically attractive. And I don't think she'd had that ever before,
Yeah.
because her husband was kind of, he was a lot older than her, and I think was interested in the voice. In the opera world, she was surrounded by gay men who loved her and adored her, but they weren't interested in her
Oh yeah.
physically. And then suddenly she meets a man who just really wants to go to bed with her. And I think that is a very intoxicating thing if you've never had that before. That is, a big deal. And I think for her, to experience that kind of passion, something she's been singing about all her life, and then for the first time to experience it, must have been overwhelming.
I was also drawn to like the way you paint the world that they're moving through, which is, there's an aged Winston Churchill, there's a maybe tipsy Grace Kelly,
I
like there are all
know.
these people, and what hit me was this feels like the kind of party you'd want to go to once or twice.
Yes.
But if you were trapped in this world, if it's this revolving thing and we just do it one night in Paris and another night in Geneva, you're just hungry for somebody who you
Mm,
can really connect with. And
mm.
they seem to see each other across the party and have that in a way. I thought it was very magnetic. Like I understood why they wanted each other. And yet there were times where I just said, oh my goodness. Oh Maria, please.
And
Do
it's
you
a car. Sorry.
do
Yeah.
you
No,
think
I'm glad you felt that. That's exactly how I felt.
I mean, part of this comes, I mean, do you think that she just, for all the confidence she had on stage, was she comfortable being in love? Was she comfortable? Did she know what to do with it and how to recognize it? Like, what's her relationship to love?
I think her relationship to love was uneasy because she was scared, clearly. I mean, she'd never really been loved for herself. I don't think that, I mean, I think the only person who really, really loves her for herself in this whole story is her maid, Bruna, who is the kind of unsung heroine. And, she really does love her. But, when I think she finds it very difficult. But once she's started to get it, she can't give it up because it makes her feel so incredible. This missing piece of her heart from her childhood, that she's filling with the sort of what the shrinks would call the narcissistic supplies that a narcissist is giving her. Plus, there's the sex. That's a big deal. I mean, if you haven't had, you know, that kind of physical pleasure before, it's pretty mesmerizing, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Well, and it's
I,
hitting her with the kind of fresh blush that it hits us when we're teenagers in our 20s.
yeah,
You can't believe
exactly.
you could feel this good.
Yeah, exactly. She's never had that before. And then suddenly she gets it with this guy and she's like, whoa. And, you know, I can see why you would, you know, decide that nothing else mattered for a bit. I mean, I think she didn't think music didn't matter, but, you know, I could see why she might think, I'm going to ditch the husband who's kind of been sponging off me for the last 10 years, you know?
No.
So,
The other significant love story in this book is an unrequited one between Elsa Maxwell and Maria Callas. Can you start, because I think it might be necessary, just telling people like a little thumbnail sketch of who Elsa Maxwell was?
Elsa Maxwell's the most extraordinary character, unlikely person you can imagine. She was about 5 foot nothing, not attractive, a piano player in a silent movie theatres who, in some extraordinary way, parlayed herself into becoming the kind of social arbiter of, you know, pre and post-war cafe society. Nobody could have a party in Monte Carlo or in New York or in Venice unless Elsa Maxwell was involved. I mean, how she did this, I don't know, but she knew everybody. She was properly famous. She appeared in movies. She had a regular TV slot. She had a syndicated column. I mean, I guess she was sort of like a sort of entertainment Martha Stewart in some ways. I mean, astonishing. Her reach was amazing, and you know, it shows how kind of fame is a very passing thing. But yeah, at that time, she was enormously famous. Plus, she was gay and not out, but she lived with a woman called Dickie. So yeah, and she saw Maria, and she was the only person when Maria made her New York debut who didn't fall at Maria's feet and wrote a slightly sniffy review. And Maria kind of sought her out and said, what's going on? And of course, the moment Elsa meets Maria, she's like, oh, maybe I made a mistake, you know, and she fell for her. And
She's
she absolutely,
like,
yeah. It was like she just followed her around. But in some ways, she was Maria's evil genius, because before she'd met Maria, she didn't really go out. And then Elsa was tempting her with parties and come to Venice and I'll give a ball for you and all this sort of stuff. And Maria's beginning to think, yeah, well, maybe I would quite like to do some of those things. And then Onassis actually, I think, pays Maxwell to introduce Maria to him. So it's a very difficult, complicated relationship. But then, of course, once they've met, Elsa is no longer necessary, and she's kind of, you know, booted into the outer darkness and is heartbroken.
I was sort of drawn by how Elsa and Maria are these really interesting examples of how women can hold power in the 1950s and the 1960s.
Yeah.
Maria with her talent, Elsa with her connections.
Mm.
But there is something to like, but if you can't sing tonight and you can't introduce me to the right person, the status doesn't seem to stick. I mean, and I was wondering, I mean, you know, you're Winston, I mean, not to put all these things on the same level. Winston Churchill is sort of a dotty old man, but he still paid tribute for what he did. Yeah. Whereas if you can't produce as a woman, you're done. Can you talk about the role of sexism in these women's lives, particularly Maria's, and how you think it shaped their realities?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I think that's true. I think that, well, Elsa Maxwell was somebody who, you know, yes, she had to be in the public eye she had to be seen to be believed. And once she was no longer hosting the greatest parties, she faded into insignificance. And Maria, I think that Maria was always a star. I mean, you know, even her last tour where she wasn't in her greatest voice, people queued, you know, for days to see her. But I think she didn't feel that she had the power and the potency that she'd had before. And I think that, as you say, that people sort of rather relish the fact that she was in decline. And you wouldn't say that really about a Pavarotti or a Domingo or whatever. You would say, oh, it's wonderful, they're still going. But people began, even when she was alive, to say, oh, you know, this ruined voice and so forth. And there was a pylon, really. And I think it's so unfair because, you know, this woman had done more for opera and more to make ordinary people enjoy and go to opera than anyone else in the world. And yet, even now, you know, there's a sort of sense that she's this tragic figure. And as I said at the
or that she
beginning,
was reckless.
yes, reckless. Yes, absolutely reckless. When there's nothing reckless about Maria at all. She was the most devoted, kind of conscientious person when it came to her music of anyone. There was no, you know, she didn't have an alcohol problem. She was not a sort of a Marilyn or a Judy Garland or whatever. She was really on it. And the idea that somehow it was her fault. Yes, you see, I think this is what you're getting at, that somehow we like to victim blame with Maria. We like to point at her and say, well, the reason your voice has gone is that you've spent too much time at parties, you've been hanging out with millionaires. That's not what happened at all. The reason her voice began to fail was because the men around her had encouraged her to sing too much, too young. And so, yes, she's the victim of men, but not in the way that we would think. So I think that's so unfair that she is somehow blamed for her own, you know, the fact that her voice begins to go. We don't blame Usain Bolt for not sprinting anymore, do we? And that's precisely what happened to Maria.
I'll tell you, I mean, I'm also a fan of Beverly Sills, and she talked about being in a performance for Pavarotti where his voice wasn't in the best of shape. And he was supposed to hit a high note. And she said she watched on stage as he threw his arm up and opened his mouth and made no sound. And the crowd went wild. Like almost like they heard it or they thought maybe they weren't hearing it. And she thought, I could never get away with that.
Yeah.
And and that's the standard right there, that the men can have a bad night, miss it, have a cold, not sing at all, and the crowd sort of forgives it, where they're sitting there waiting for these women in places like La Scala. I thought that was also interesting too, that you sort of show that La Scala is like no place else in the opera world, and that crowd. I mean,
oh my God. It's like a football crowd. I mean, it's like a soccer stadium. It's full of, you know, when she started, you know, there was this other soprano, Renata Tebaldi, and there were people who supported Tebaldi, claques, and people who supported Callas, and they would literally come to blows over who was the better singer. I mean, extraordinary.
How did writing Diva differ from writing your other novels, like the New York Times bestseller, The American Heiress?
Well, The American Heiress is my first novel, and I think, you know, as you know, when you write a first novel, you don't know what to expect, so you just really enjoy it, you know, and the characters take off, and you kind of think, well, hey, you know, I'll just do my best. And once you've written one novel that works, you think, oh God, how am I going to do this again? So that was terrifying. But writing Diva, I suppose, unlike all the other things I've done, there was moving pictures of her, you know, so I could look at footage of her talking, and that was great because that did give me real confidence when it came to capturing her voice and capturing. I mean, what I find extraordinary looking at her on screen when she's giving interviews is that she is completely authentic, and that's what makes her so modern, really, is that there's no PR spin to Maria. I mean, whatever she's saying, you just look at her face and you know exactly what she's thinking. I mean, she is, you know, when she says, oh, Mr. Onassis, I don't care what he does, you know, you just know if she had a dagger, she would be plunging it into his chest. And I just found her mesmerizing to watch. And that, you know, that was a new experience for me. And also I loved writing about the kind of the whole world of the jewels and this kind of faded, you know, this world of luxury and whatever. I mean, as I was sitting in my very unluxurious seat at the library, you know, I loved all of that. It's an escape.
I know this is a tricky question I'm going to ask you, which is how long did it take you to write the book? Because you find sometimes as a writer, you've been thinking about a person or thinking about a world for years before you actually go, oh, that's why that's been of interest to me. But in the conventional sense, how long did it take to write this?
I think it took me about 8 months. I would say, yeah. And, you know, really just, that's to write the long first draft, and then I cut an enormous amount. So
I want to talk about that too, because there's something to process. I find with novels, I think I'm going to cover way more territory than I'm ever going to cover.
Yeah.
And then you get it, you go, oh my God, you're going to take this person from cradle to grave.
Yeah. No, I had to be disciplined, because I knew that if I could have written a novel 8 times as long, and my editor was like, yeah, 120,000 is really quite enough. And I think now it's just over 100. It's about 108,000, and it started off a lot longer. And it's always good to cut. It's always good to cut. But
are you brutal? I mean, do you kind of go to the editor's side and say, I'm sorry, Daisy, this section's out, or does it hurt?
Of course it hurts, but I know, because like you, I've worked in TV, in the end, it's always better shorter, always.
Yeah.
I mean, people get it. They don't need too much. And you just want to keep it, going. I think there's such a responsibility. I felt a responsibility to Maria to make sure that the story really moved swiftly through, because I wanted people to kind of really feel for her and grow to care about her, really.
You mentioned television. You wrote Victoria, and you brought Victoria to television. Could you see Maria? I mean, I could see Maria.
Oh my God.
Going to television. I mean, it just, I mean, what do you think?
Well, I'm available. The rights are still out there. No, I think it would be an amazing series. It would be an amazing series, because I know there's a movie being made at the moment, but I think you could do a fantastic TV series about it. There's so much
deeper. So much deeper.
Yeah, so much deeper. And also, it's such a glamorous world. And also, how often do you have something where you've got a woman at the heart who's actually a genius? That is almost never happening. And where her relationship is about her and the world rather than her and a man. I mean, yes, there are men, but it's about her and her talent, And there's so much more I could do. I mean, just like the whole love triangle between Maria Visconti and Leonard Bernstein when they were doing Traviata at La Scala, which I couldn't even go there, because I just thought that's a whole book in itself, So there's so much more I could have done, but I tried to keep the narrative shape quite tight, so that you kind of knew where you were going, but you kind of got enough backstory to kind of enough texture to know who she was and how she'd become the way she had.
I'm gonna throw my opinion out here, and then I'll see how you feel about it. There's so much about Maria that I think she can sort of show to contemporary artists, and I was wondering what your ideas on that were. But I look at somebody like Beyonce, who is very particular about the visuals and the music and the way she is presented and the way she delivers the album and the music, and the idea that an artist can have that kind of control and should have that kind of control. I mean, it's hard to remind people that, singing used to be the spotlight's there, the microphones go up there and sing 5 songs and get the hell out of here. But the idea that they could express themselves across the entire presentation. I look at Maria Callas, I'm like, that is someone who pioneered that. What are some of the things you think artists could draw from someone like Maria?
Well, I think she, as you say, she pioneered the idea of the total package. I mean, I don't think she was ever off stage, in a sense, in public. When she went out, she developed this look that was her look and is so instantly iconic. She knew the value of branding. She wasn't naturally stylish. I mean, she brought it in, but she did it perfectly. I think she was ruthless about getting it right. She knew her own value. I mean, I love the idea that she won't sing with Von Karajan unless she's paid the same as him, and he was the greatest conductor in the world. So she was utterly confident of her own worth. And I think that is a lesson that every female performer needs to take to heart. And I think she also was, she knew she was the star. She owned it. And I think that again, and she never, ever let, men use her in the way that, there was no casting couch for Maria. There was literally, she was, she just held herself. I mean, she was scary, I think. I mean, she was 5'9", and, I think if she wanted to give you the Medusa look, you would be shriveled. She owned her own power, and I think that's so important. And I think, all performers need to know how to do that. And she didn't, and this is very important, she didn't try to be liked, and I don't think we need, as women, we don't need to be liked. We all want to be liked, but actually that's a waste of time. You don't need to be nice. You just need to be authentic, and you need to own your talent. And I think that's something that we can learn from Maria.
I'm curious. You said something that just struck me even as a writer, and I'm not even a performer on stage, but there is something about when you get into show business where you're made to feel in the beginning that you should be grateful, that you're being given this opportunity. You should be grateful that we're letting you do this. And there is a moment where you have to sort of turn around and go, wait a minute. These people are coming here because of me. This is happening because I wrote it, and I want to be paid. Personally, that took me years. Years before I was like, I almost thought if someone offered you a job, you almost had to take it.
Yeah, no, exactly. But Maria, she's 22. She auditions for the Met in New York, the biggest opera house in the world, and they offer her a contract, but it's not the contract she wants because it's playing B parts. And she's like, I'm not playing a maid or a lady in waiting. I'm a prima donna. I should be singing, the lead roles. And they go, yeah, but you're some Greek nobody, forget it. And she goes, all right, well, your loss. You'll be begging me to come back. And of course they were.
Where do you, from your experience, where did that, is that innate in her? Where did that come? That's incredible nerve.
It is. I know. It's incredible. Well, I think she just knew how good she was, and I think if you know, that's why she was a genius. She didn't doubt her own talent. She doubted other things, but she didn't doubt her own talent. And that's, I think, what makes her so extraordinary, because she said every performance is like going into a battle that I have to win. And I think, she knew that she could do that. And I think she just knew she was better than everyone else. And that's a very rare thing in a woman. And that's what I love about her. How can you not love her for that?
And this is my own personal thing. Bruna, her mate, is Bruna real?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What happens to Bruna? Tell us.
It's very sad, actually. She, when Maria dies, very young at 53, I think she dies intestate. So all the money goes to the horrible ex-husband, the mother, and the sister, who all, had, done her wrong. And I think they did look after Bruna and her chauffeur as well. But poor Bruna. What a wonderful woman. She was really the person that kept Maria going, I think, from the moment they met.
It is interesting that it's another love story.
It is. It's definitely that. There are lots of love stories in this book, and they're not all the ones, that's not the obvious one. I think there is lots of sort of love in different ways, and I was very interested by that, and I felt, and between Franco and Maria too, there's love. There's a sort of, she's got all this love, but she finds it hard to believe because, she's got this terrible mother.
Well, Bruna's also serves this other function, which is if Maria's supposed to be this temperamental diva, she wouldn't have inspired such devotion from someone.
No. And Maria was capable of great affection. She loved Bruna. Of course she did. I think that, and also, great people, geniuses do, inspire a kind of devotion that you don't find anywhere else. And it's just I think Bruna was like Maria's wife. She's like the wife in Maestro or whatever. She's the one that kind of takes care of her and looks after her and makes sure, that she's there. And, I think it's a very touching relationship, and it worked for both of them.
Oh, so it's very beautiful and very well done.
Thank you.
Um, how was it to say goodbye to Maria? Like when you're done with the book, do you just sort of close that book and you're relieved to be done with it, or do you still miss Maria?
Of course I miss Maria, but you know, when I was writing the last few chapters, because it's about her singing Tosca at Covent Garden, and I was listening to a lot of Maria sing and watching it, and it was like I was pretty much on stage myself at that point, and it was very emotional. I
Mhm.
was in tears when I finished it, actually. And I wanted to give it a sort of sense of an ending. I wanted to leave it on a note where, you know, you feel that Maria has found herself, that she's, you know, the goddess again.
And to the extent that you want to share with everyone, what did you discover about yourself writing this book?
Oh, well, I suppose just the power of being able to own your own talent. I mean, and to realize that being powerful, you know, a lot of that you can be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. Because a lot of people say to me, sometimes amazingly, oh, but you're so scary. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not. You don't understand. I'm like marshmallow inside. But I think that's the point, that people can be commanding, they can be, you know, confident, but actually inside they're terrified. And I guess that's something probably Maria and I have in common.
Mm. Well, you mentioned, I mean, it is tough to be sort of assertive. I mean, in my own life, I'm always trying to do it with a little bit of humor, trying to
Yeah,
kid everybody. You're
yeah.
trying to make everyone else comfortable with your power.
Yes, yes.
And it's something, the sad thing is every once in a while you go, I don't have the time to coddle everyone right now.
I know, I know, I
You
know.
know,
And I think that was, Maria was like, you know, we're all here, we're rehearsing. I don't care. Let's just get the music right. You know, let's block this again. You know,
yeah.
she would go on and on. She would rehearse until she got it right. And other singers were furious.
Well, I'm also knocked out by, like, I mean, even in television or something, you get a rehearsal period, you get a time where everybody's sort of getting used to the idea. And it feels
Mm.
like with, these operas, it's like, well, Norma, just come and sing Norma.
Yeah,
And you're like,
yeah,
this is a different
exactly.
stage. Who are these
Yeah.
people? I've never sung with this orchestra. And all of that has to be figured out incredibly quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, and for Maria too, you have to remember that she's almost blind because she's got so short-sighted, and so she has to kind of figure out where she is on stage by remembering how many steps she's taking. So, you know, she would block it out in her head with her glasses on, and then she takes her glasses off, so she's, you know, singing blind. And I think that must have been really quite scary because, you know, she didn't. I mean, there was one amazing moment which I write about in the book where her hair, her hairpiece catches on fire when she's singing Tosca. And she doesn't notice because she's so in the moment. And
Yeah.
the tenor, instead of embracing her, starts hitting her around the head to put out the flames.
I see Omar there.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to uh, um, say a few questions. So Donna says, I recently watched The Women performed at the Met on PBS, great performances. Women singers look so different in the contemporary sphere. What might Maria Callas say about contemporary divas?
I think she would have grudgingly admired them. I think she would have really been impressed by the way that contemporary singers like Joyce DiDonato and people like that have really followed in her tradition of singing with their whole bodies, of becoming consummate actors as well as musicians. And I think she would have felt very flattered by that, because that is what she brought to the stage. And also, you know, the fact that her legacy, you know, all these operas that she resurrected, like Lucia di Lammermoor and La Sonnambula and things like that, are still being sung, basically because Callas kind of showed that they could still be done. Although Norma doesn't get done very often, because I think that really is so hard that not many singers are going to go there.
Wait, this made me think, do contemporary opera singers, do they keep the schedule that she used to keep?
Well, I don't know. I think they do work very hard, but I think that I think they probably don't. They're probably not pushed as much as she was, because I think people know now that you've really got to look after your voice. That, you know, you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So you've really got to keep resting and whatever. And that, you know, if you've got a cold or anything, you've got to stop. And I hope that they're not pushing themselves like Maria did, because, you know,
Yeah, I feel like audiences and house managers are more forgiving. Like, if you say you've got a cold, everybody goes, we get it, and we'll reschedule this, and, you know, as opposed to the outcry if Maria said,
yeah. I mean, yes, I went to hear Joyce Donato sing at the Royal Opera House, and just before the curtain went up, the house manager came on stage, and we all thought, oh no, he's going to say she's not going to sing. And he actually came on to say she's got a bit of a cold, so she's worried that she won't be singing at her best, and she wants you to understand. And I thought that was amazing, you know. And in fact, she sang beautifully. It was all fine. But it was like, I think she was nervous. She was managing expectations. I don't think Maria would ever have done that, but I thought it was interesting, you know.
We're always the hardest on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Shelley has a few questions. She says, could Daisy comment on some scenes in the book, such as their first sexual encounter in the lifeboat on the yacht? That was a pretty juicy item. Did she mention it in her memoirs? And also, how do you decide which elements, such as some of the more dramatic scenes, to put in the book?
Okay, well, I think Maria didn't write her memoirs, but there's a certain amount of evidence that there was something happened in that lifeboat, because if you think about it, where else were they going to go? Because, you know, no cabin was safe, and, you know, there were lots of husbands and spouses running around. As to what actually happened between them, I'm afraid I used a bit of artistic license there. I mean, I have to say it's the first sex scene I've ever written, so apologies if it offends anyone, but I felt it was very important to have it in there, because otherwise you've got to feel that, you know, this is the first time basically that she's ever experienced sexual pleasure. And if you don't, you know, I had to convey that. I mean, I would never ever write a sex scene just because, you know, I thought it would sell more copies. I did it because I wanted you to really feel the sort of overwhelming desire that she felt for Onassis. So that was my rationale for that.
Daisy, forgive me. We got so into this conversation. I was going to ask, would you mind reading an excerpt?
No, I would love to. I would love to. I was going to read a little bit from the beginning. The first time she sings at La Scala, and she is terrified of going on stage because there's just been a Time cover of her, and there's been a real takedown, and saying that she's kind of a great singer but a really horrible person, and she is terrified to go on stage. And so this is her in the sort of build up to that. She's singing Norma, and she's with her husband, Tita, waiting to go on. Tita was waiting for her in the wings. She clutched his arm and whispered in his ear, "I can't do it, Tita, my voice, it's not going to come." Tita lifted the briefcase in his other hand. There are 10,000 reasons in here why you will go on, and you will triumph. You always have, and you always will. Maria was shaking with fear. "But this time is different, Tita. I know that they hate me." Tita could see the stage manager behind Maria. The cue for her entrance was less than a minute away. "Give me your glasses, Maria." he took the heavy spectacles off her face. Now, make your crosses. Obediently, her hands still trembling, she began to trace the sign of the cross on her chest, once, twice, 3 times. On the last cross, her hand was a little steadier. The long note from the trumpets that signaled Norma's entrance began. Maria stood, still as a statue. The stage manager stepped forward. Tita's hand hovered, waiting to push, but then Maria lifted her shoulders and stepped out of the wings and onto the stage. She could hear applause, but there was something else, a sibilance, a rumble that she recognized as the enemy's artillery in the distance. The auditorium was a dark chasm, the audience a pale blur. Even the conductor was just a blob at her feet. The chorus was all around her, asking for her, as their priestess, to tell them what to do. The strings started to play the ghostly arpeggios that heralded the start of her great aria, and then on the 8th bar, Maria lifted her head, and it was Norma who sang the opening bars of Casta Diva, her voice soaring out over the orchestra and reaching right to the back of the opera house. Norma implored the goddess to bring peace to her people. The voice was filling her body. It was pouring out like the silvery beams of the moon she was worshipping, and it floated out over the listeners who, as the voice reached the high notes at the end of the aria, understood what it was to have faith. When she finished, there was silence. Maria bowed her head, waiting for the return of fire, but then a voice from the gods shouted, "Brava!" and a storm of clapping surged through the theatre. Maria felt the warmth of the applause run through her, burning away her fear. She was no longer Maria, the vulnerable woman, but Callas, la divina, who could bring a hostile audience to its feet.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, it's kind of emotional to read, but I mean, you know, I was just trying to convey the sort of physical terror and then that feeling of incredible sort of, oh, I can do it. And, you know, when she gets it right, it must have been so magical.
Well, it also illustrates something I really love about the book, which is I think a lot of us have ideas of what it's like to stand on stage. You are showing us what happens backstage and in the wings. And that's a whole other world. That's a whole other terror, you know,
Yeah.
before you go out there and maybe you sort of find your footing.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the idea that she's blind until she takes her glasses off, and then, you know, I mean she takes her glasses off, she can't see anything, so she can't be afraid really, because, you know, she just has to blur her way through the thing. And yeah, I mean, it was an amazing thing to imagine, actually.
Well, on that note, we will close this up. I mean, we could keep going for hours, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I could talk about
Yeah.
Maria all day.
Thank you so much, Daisy. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you, Rashid, for being our moderator today.
Oh, you
That
were
was fun.
amazing, Rashid. Thank
That
you
was fun.
so much. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you.
Thanks for everyone for joining us. This webinar is recorded and will be posted onto our YouTube channel tomorrow. Please join us again for another author event in the near future. Have a great day.